Hi, good morning to our listeners. This is your host, Sandeep Pednekar, and you're listening and watching One Universe based on the nonprofit that promotes positivity through the promotion of love, peace, and harmony. So, what is promotion of love, peace, and harmony? At times, we talk about bad things that happen to people, but the good thing that comes out of it is how to overcome those bad things, talking about the issues, what the problems are. Once you recognize the problem, then you can find a solution. And to talk about some things associated with that positivity, we have today's guest, Dr. Ellen Kirschman. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
I'm happy to be here. Good morning.
Yeah, very good morning to you. So, for the benefit of our viewers, please introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm talking to you now from California, but I have not always lived in California. I was born in Manhattan, in New York,
Okay.
and lived there until my late 20s when I came out to California to visit my brother who lived here. And the minute my feet hit the tarmac, I realized there had been some form of cosmic mix-up and I had been born on the wrong coast.
Okay.
I never went back to New York. Seriously, I left a job and an apartment. I was kind of running away from home without saying goodbye. And then I came here and began my life here. This was in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bachelor's degree from the Delphi University located in New York. And my bachelor's degree is in dance with a minor in psychology.
Wow.
I thought I was destined to have a role in the theater. There were a lot of things that went wrong with that, but probably the major component was that I just wasn't talented enough, not compared to other people on Broadway.
Okay.
So what do you do when you're new to California? You have not much money and a bachelor's degree in dance. Not much. So I waited tables for quite a while, and I began to, I got a job as a modeling school instructor.
Okay.
John Robert Powers. Now you cannot see me because I'm sitting down, but I am barely 5 feet tall. So I'm not exactly your slender, willowy, tall modeling type, but I was teaching something called visual poise, which has some very loose relations with dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I also become very interested in psychotherapy. I began my own therapy, and I began to study with a very famous man by the name of Eric Berne. He wrote a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay,
Yeah.
Play. Well, he was a sort of a wild man, and he used to gather people together in his house Tuesday nights, and we'd go and talk about his theories of psychology. I was the only modeling school instructor there. I'm absolutely certain of that. But I began to import some of what I was learning from him into the modeling school. Totally inappropriate. But I could tell that people were being sent to this modeling school because back then some therapists thought if a woman was more attractive, her life would be more beautiful, would be happier, which of course is totally sexist and delusional in many ways. So we did have students who killed themselves because when they got prettier as a result of being in the modeling school, they were no more socially adept. They had no more real, true self-confidence, authenticity. So it happened that 2 probation officers showed up in my class. I'm old, Sandy. You asked me for this question, so my background is long, okay?
Well, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So these 2 probation officers said to me, Ellen, what are you doing working here and trying to counsel people sort of on the sly? So there are times, Sandeep, I think my life, I'm sort of like a pinball. I bump into this thing and I go that direction, bump into that thing, go that direction. So I, with the encouragement of these 2 women, I became a probation officer. I did juvenile and adult work, and met my first husband there. We were both in training to be probation officers.
Okay.
I didn't last very long there because it's a broken system, and I could not in good conscience be doing things like locking girls up for running away from homes in which I thought that was the best thing they could have done to save themselves, was run away. I also, and this is a sort of an interesting anecdote, during that time, I wrote a report as a pre-sentence probation officer. You write these reports about the suspect, the defendant rather, for the judge. And my supervisor at the time said he thought that I had written the best report he had seen in all of his time in probation.
Okay.
The problem was he didn't think it had anything to do with the suspect. So that was a hint that, maybe I really should be writing fiction. Anyhow, I stayed 2 years. I decided to go back to school and get my master's from the University of California, my master's in social work, so I could be useful to these families in which there was such trouble and kids were being so abused and troubled. And then I began working at Kaiser Hospital, which is a very large hospital system out here in the West, and working in the psychiatry clinic. And I wore out there after about 7 years because it was too confining for me. I'm a really active person. And I can't sit quietly and talk to people hour after hour for 40 something hours a week. So I wanted to go on half-time, and that really wasn't permitted. But the important thing that happened to me at Kaiser was that I began to talk to the wives of police officers who were coming in and saying there was real trouble at home. And I got really interested in that, partially because of my probation background and partially because it was interesting to me. It was sort of dramatic. And I began to get more interested in that. And I put together a class called I Love a Cop. And I took it up because I'm thinking naively that if you can explain something, you can fix it. That was naive. So I went up to the local community college and said, hey, I have this idea for an evening class here. And it turns out that the public relations director of the college was married to a cop. And she thought this was a great idea. And they said, what do you want to call it? I said, oh, let's call it, I don't know, I Love a Cop. They went into the college catalog. The day after it went into the college catalog, the class was filled and there were 40-something women, all women, on the waiting list. So that told me that I had met an unmet need in the community. That propelled me. After I was told I could not go back down to half-time, I just quit and went back to school once again, and got my doctorate in psychology, studying police officers with a particular eye on what causes them to be stressed out. How do people who start their careers being healthy and whole wind up leaving on a stress-related disability retirement? Nobody was doing that kind of work at that time. So this got some attention from local police departments, particularly my emphasis on the family. And I began to get work and go into various police departments doing workshops, doing more of the family work that I had been doing. The class itself shut down because the part of the community college had to shut down.
Okay.
It took me 20 years, Sandeep, before I actually wrote the book, I Love a Cop. This one. So, but now I had more than a good idea under my belt. Now what I had was some real experience with police officers, hundreds of hours of ride-alongs in their patrol vehicles, hanging around agencies, seeing how police departments can poorly manage the people who work for them, looking at how difficult and complex the job was. So that book came out, I think it was 1997. After September 11th, my publisher said, look at how many firefighters were killed, look at how brave they were. We need a similar book for firefighters. And I had also been working with various fire departments.
Okay.
So I wrote the book, I Love a Firefighter. And then What the Family Needs to Know is the subtitle. And then a few years after that, two colleagues of mine, both of them are psychologists and retired cops. By then I was working, as I still am, volunteering at something called the First Responder Support Network.
Okay.
Doing this in addition to my private practice. And that's where I met those two men, and learning just a ton more and hearing stories all the time from our clients there about how mistreated they were by therapists. So it's hard enough for a first responder to reach out for help. And when they get someone who doesn't understand what they do or why they do it, or has an attitude toward them, they quit therapy right away. So for example, one of the clients said they went out, they'd been in 2 fatal shootings. They were having terrible nightmares, thinking they were going to have to leave the job. They couldn't control their emotions. They went to see a therapist, and the therapist said to them, "So, are you ready to stop being a trained killer?" I can tell by your reaction, you know what a horrible, insulting, and totally inappropriate response that was. This man was feeling more like a victim than a killer. Why had these things happened on his watch? Why had he been forced to make one of the hardest choices a human can make, to take another life? So we then, as a result of that, we thought, the 3 of us thought we should write a book for clinicians to tell them how we work with cops, not how anybody else does. So we wrote Counseling Cops, What Clinicians Need to Know, in order to give people who may have seen 1 or 2 cops in their entire career, to make them more culturally competent. And that's the phrase we use, culturally competent police, psychologists, or social workers. And then at that point, I sort of got tired of reality. It is responsible. You have to be really responsible when you write a nonfiction book. You want to get the good science separated from the junk science. You want to write it in a way that people can read it and so forth. But it's different than writing fiction, and I'll say something about that in a minute. I thought, it really must be easier to make this stuff up. I was absolutely wrong about that. It's much harder to write fiction. When you write
But by that time, you're already written 2 books.
I've already written 3 nonfiction books.
Okay. And how many copies had you sold by then of each?
Well, I can only give you like today's dates, today's numbers. I don't remember back then, but it was. But I Love a Cop has sold probably 150,000 copies.
Okay.
It's used in academies and family orientations and handed out sort of almost like a textbook. Very gratifying for me, because I believe it's made a difference in so many lives. I Love a Firefighter, but maybe about 35,000. Firefighters were a lot happier with their jobs, and their families, therefore, are more happy. And the Counseling Cops book, maybe we've sold 10,000. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I'm not a numbers person. I don't follow these things very.
Okay. And are they available on Amazon and other places?
Yeah, all of them. Okay.
Okay. All right. So yeah, please continue.
Okay. So at that point, after we started making things up, I began to write a mystery series called the Dot Meyerhoff Mysteries. Dot named after my mother, Meyerhoff after my maternal grandmother. And Dot is a lot younger than I am, and she does things that I would have lost my license for doing, such as assault with a deadly weapon and breaking and entering, that sort of thing. And I use these books as a vehicle to get behind the badge for people who might not read any of my nonfiction books. If they read my fiction books, they get a good story, and they get information that they don't hear anywhere else. That's the kind of feedback I've gotten. Like, wow, that was a good story, but I didn't know that, fill in the blanks, about officers. So they all they're not graphic novels by any stretch. no on-screen sex or no on-screen violence, but you do learn about issues such as the first book, Police Suicide.
Hmm.
People don't know is that cops in the United States are twice as likely to kill themselves as they are to be killed in the line of duty. For a population that had to be screened to get their job, that's a very alarming statistic. The second one dealt with what is it like to shoot and kill an unarmed person because you've mistaken in the dark a cell phone for a.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it is also, that same book is about the hardships for women in a male-dominated profession. These are all inspired by people I've worked with in my role as a psychologist. So, for example, the last example I gave, I was working with a female officer who had been badly treated by her male counterparts
Mhm.
until she shot and killed somebody. And then she became everyone's hero.
Wow.
That turned her stomach, and she said, if that's what it takes to get into the good old boys club, I'm out of here. And she eventually quit and did something else. The third book comes out of a client I met at the First Responder Support Network, whose spouse, her male spouse, was dealing with what's called ICAC investigations. That means Internet Crimes Against Children. It is one of the most difficult and challenging assignments emotionally for any police officer. And he was so involved with his case that his own family was sort of falling apart, and he had seen so much abuse to children. He was having trouble touching his own children in an intimate, close way, like giving them a bath or something.
Oh,
So that's what the
that is
third.
sad.
Yeah, it is sad. It is sad.
So, when you're talking about these things, many things pop up in my mind, especially because I personally serve on the Memphis City's Law Enforcement Review Board.
Mhm.
And I, as an individual, try to see to it that the gap that I see, uh, people, one, disrespecting police officers because of their environment and the environment that they grew in. And when I say environment, we're talking about culture, parents, and the society itself. And the police officers that say, hey, you know what, we tell them to do some things and they don't do it. So on one side, of course, there is at times there is a thing to not listen to police officers. At times there is some fear of what a police officer can do to you. And then there is lack of knowledge, and most of it is lack of knowledge. So I personally want, and have been since 2015, seen to it that I bridge that gap between the Memphis Police Department and the citizens. But it is not easy. Now that we have lots of body cams, we can see who has done what. And it is very easy to say that, hey, oh, he was at fault. Oh, no, it was the police officer who was at fault. So you can get that evidence also because we have an investigative person also on board. But having police officers as friends over 2 decades now, I know and understand riding a police car, having the sirens on, and what it takes, what goes through you, um, is a different thing. And you haven't talked to so many police officers. You have a different take on what the psychology of a police officer is, what he or she goes through, than what is understood by the common man. So, what do you find as the difference between that?
You and I met at the National Civil Rights Museum for
Hmm.
those. All right. It was an amazing place. And when I came back from there, I blogged with Psychology Today, and I was trying to process what I had learned, felt, and observed. including an incredibly palpable anger toward the police. That is different out here in California. We got plenty of anger toward the police, but it was almost more palpable in Memphis. And so I wrote a blog. And what I talked about in this blog as a result of that visit was intergenerational trauma, which is trauma that is passed down from one generation to the next. I have, and what I recounted as we went through the museum, and I had the same experience reading a wonderful book called Caste. I don't know if you've read that book or not.
No, I'm not.
Oh, I think you would really love it. It's Isabel Wilkerson. They even had it posted in that museum. Caste, in which she talks about race issues from the point of view of a caste system. Very well written book. And when I was reading Wilkerson's book and when I was walking through the National Civil Rights Museum, I said to myself repeatedly, why did I not know about this? Why did I not know about that? And I'm a reader. I'm a voracious reader.
Nice.
And if I don't know about those things that are part of my country's history, what's a 21-year-old brand new cop who is coming on the job, what do they know about the fact that, as one of my fellow panelists said, that cops started out as slave patrols in this country? How dare we send them out into the community without an understanding that people are looking at them through traumatized eyes? They have inherited, as you said, in their homes, what they hear, what they see, what they read, what they heard from grandma, what they heard from grandpa. That level of distrust that gets into your DNA, it actually changes people biologically. So that is not to take away from the fact that we give police officers the most power of any peacetime entity at all. They have the ability to take people's life away and remove their civil rights. So they definitely have to be held to a very high standard, and they have to be properly supervised. And what they do has to be modified, and they have to be held accountable for their actions. There is no denying we have some egregious acts of by police officers that shame and embarrass all of us who are trying to do a decent job, all the cops that are trying to do a decent job. We have a sensation-seeking public that loves media, that has really headlines about scandals and horrible things, and you won't find very many accounts of the hundreds of thousands of courageous and kind acts police officers do every single day. They don't make headlines. What makes a headline is something horrible.
True, very true.
So, I mean, a whole and then police are also mythologized in television. How many television programs are there about law enforcement personnel? A lot. And of course, they're not really human. They don't really act. Very few ever show the real human side and the emotional toll that this takes. So I'm curious if I can turn the interview table around here, Sandy. What is it that you've been doing to try to close this gap?
So the fact is that when cases come to us, to the board, we see lot of evidence provided. The issues that the board in Memphis, Tennessee, primarily is that no police officers come to the hearings when we look at the cases. So we do not have we would like to question them, ask them rather, instead of questioning them, but we do not have that. Hopefully it will happen soon. But the fact is that when I talk about bridging the gap, I'm talking about taking the message from the police officers, from the police department, from the city of Memphis, and the council members to the citizens. We are talking about how um, citizens react. We have had cases when we can see on the body cam, the cop has told a person, you please sit here 3 times, but he follows the cop to the house. The lady inside has not let him in, and there have been a fight, a squabble, whatever. She didn't open the door. She called 911, and both are agitated. And the cop talks to him and says, just sit right there. It tells him 3 times, and the guy does not listen and follows him to the house. So now the cop has to turn around and physically stop him. And when he is right there at the case we are looking at, he's saying he used excessive force on me. And I said, well, yes, but he did tell you not to do something. Why did you not listen to him? I'm just glad that we are still talking to you and not next of kin, right? So that is one incident. On the flip side, we have police officers on camera using nasty words, and they're recorded. They actually hit the person who has been already handcuffed, and he's bleeding from his mouth, and the cop hits him and uses really, I mean, nasty words that I wouldn't like to repeat. When we have such things, then we know, hey, I mean, he's at fault. So those cases have already gone through the internal bureau and all of that, and they come to us because the victims are not satisfied with what punishment has been given to the police officers. So the thing is that people do not know how you need to react or how you need to act in the first place, what needs to be done, how you need to handle a situation when a cop stops you. We recently, 3, 4 days back, heard about a person who was wrongly convicted and then released. And then he was caught by a cop because he was driving at 100 and he was shot and killed. This is just a few days back, right? So then we are saying, oh, it is post-traumatic stress. And it very well might be true. But the fact is that if we train people, if we let them know, if we educate them what needs to be done, how to handle a situation, then they will know how they need to act and react. And at times, cops are at fault too. People have been seen video recording on their phones, and cop says, oh, turn it off. Legally, they cannot tell people not to record. People can record it. So in that case, what should a person do? Like I just said, right? The person didn't listen to the cop. You're supposed to listen to him. But what if it is not right? So that is what I stop when I say bridging the gap. That is what I mean, is to educate not only the citizens but the police officers of how they need to act in the first place.
Well, Sandeep, good luck. I mean,
I need it. I definitely need it. I hear you loud and clear. I understand what it is, what it takes. It's not an easy task. And that is the reason why it has taken such a long time, close to a decade, not a decade, but close. And there are people who want to do it. It does not happen. But as we come to the close of this session, I would like you to give out some few words of advice to the people and to our listeners and viewers, with a note that this is a vast topic, and it cannot be over in a few minutes. So I want to say on air that I would like to have you talk about these topics on multiple interviews, but some parting piece of advice.
so years ago, Sandeep, the Anti-Defamation League put out a whole list of behaviors for citizens, how to behave if you have been pulled over by a cop. Years ago, you could probably get it from them and save yourself some work. I'm not sure that works. Every family that I'm aware of, especially an African-American family, someone of color, parents give their children the talk. Here's what to do if a cop. So I think the information about that is out there. Well, reinforce it, sure. I'd like to see cops go through the National Civil Rights Museum when they're first hired on, before they get swallowed up into this culture that is absolutely overwhelming. We see that in Memphis itself, that with Tyree Nichols' death, the offending officers were themselves African-American. So it is the blue culture, it's the blue part that needs to be addressed. And I have my own little, I call it Ellen's 11-point 11-point guide for police reform. And maybe when you have me back, that would be something I could go
definitely love to do that. Yes.
Through with you. Because this topic is really enormous. And to respond to, I'm never there. It's really hard to Monday morning quarterback what happens in a scene I wasn't at, right? And I didn't see with my own eyes. But the example you gave of the man not listening to the officer's orders to stand back. Would it have been better for the officer to walk away with the man and talk to him? Would it have been better to have a mental health person there to say, look, what's gone wrong, that things are like this?
And I would like to add that the CIT with the Memphis Police Department is very well recognized. When I attended a NACOL conference in California, they were talking about the CIT program done by the Memphis Police Department is the best. And they are the ones who are training people in different. So there are trained police officers who can handle situations where there is a psychotic episode and things like that. It's not necessarily psychotic every time, but I hope you understand what I'm leaning towards.
That's about 85% of all police calls involved emotionally disturbed people.
Yeah. Right. So yes, so I do get it, but I would like definitely to have you on our show over and over again, because this is a burning topic that I am interested in, and I want to promote that. I thank you for coming on the show, and also invite you for future interviews as well.
Thank you very much. I was pleased to be here.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Same to you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.